Hello. I always thought our marriage was the kind that could weather any storm. 7 years together, and I truly believed that Laura and I had something special. Sure, we had our ups and downs. Every couple does. But we always found a way to come back stronger. We were partners, best friends, and I never once doubted her commitment to us. That's why, when our 7th wedding anniversary came around, I wanted to make it perfect. I wanted to remind her of everything we'd built together, of all the love we'd shared. I planned a surprise for our anniversary, an evening filled with all her favorite things. I made reservations at the restaurant where we had our first date, bought her favorite flowers, sunflowers, not roses, because she always said roses were too cliché, and I even picked up a bottle of the wine we'd shared on the night we got engaged. I was excited, eager to see her face when I told her about the plans. I thought it would be the kind of night that brought us even closer together, a night that would remind us both of just how unbreakable we were. But things started to feel off that morning. Laura was unusually distant. Her responses to my questions were short, her smile forced, her eyes avoiding mine. I tried not to think too much of it. Maybe she was tired, maybe work was stressing her out. I told myself that it was nothing, that I was just reading into things, that tonight would fix whatever was bothering her. She had mentioned earlier in the week that she might have to work late, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Laura worked in marketing, and her job often demanded late nights and tight deadlines. But when she texted me that afternoon to say she would be running late, my heart sank a little. I had hoped she would be home in time for our dinner reservations, that we could start the evening I had planned together. I texted her back, trying to keep my tone light, telling her that it was okay, that we could adjust the plans. She didn't reply right away, and as the minutes turned into hours, I started to worry. I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. I sent her a few more messages, but there was no response. My heart began to pound, unease settling in my chest. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, that everything was fine, but there was a nagging feeling in the back of my mind that I just couldn't shake. By the time Laura finally got home, it was nearly 10 p.m. I was sitting on the couch, the flowers wilting on the coffee table, the bottle of wine unopened. When I heard the front door open, I jumped up, relief washing over me. But the moment I saw her, that relief turned to confusion. She looked disheveled, her hair messy, her eyes red, her cheeks flushed. She wouldn't meet my eyes, her hands trembling as she set her bag down on the floor. "Laura," I said softly, my voice filled with concern. "Where have you been? I've been calling you all evening." She looked at me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Guilt? Fear? Maybe both. "I'm sorry, Jack," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I had to stay late for a meeting. It ran longer than I expected. I frowned, my chest tightening. Something about her tone, the way she avoided my eyes, felt wrong. "Why didn't you answer my calls?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I was worried about you." She swallowed hard, her gaze still fixed on the floor. "I'm really sorry," she said again, her voice cracking. I didn't have my phone with me." I stared at her, my heart pounding, the unease growing. "Laura, what's going on?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're acting strange. Did something happen?" She finally looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears, her face twisted with pain. "Jack, I need to tell you something," she whispered, her voice breaking. My heart sank, a cold fear washing over me. "What is it?" I asked, my voice trembling. She took a deep breath, her tears spilling over, her shoulders trembling. I saw Ryan today," she said softly, her voice barely audible. Ryan. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. He was her ex, the one she had dated for years before we met. I had always felt a little insecure about him. He was the guy she had thought she would marry, the one she had loved before me. She had always assured me that it was over, that she had moved on, that I was the one she wanted to be with. But now, standing here, hearing his name, I felt a surge of fear and anger. "Why?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why did you see him?" She looked down, her tears falling faster, her face filled with regret. He reached out to me a few weeks ago, she whispered, her voice trembling. He said he wanted to catch up, that he needed closure. I thought it would be harmless, that it would help put everything in the past once and for all. But today, things got out of hand. I felt my stomach turn, my heart pounding in my chest. What do you mean, out of hand? I asked, my voice rising. What happened, Laura? She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears, her face twisted in pain. I'm so sorry, Jack, she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't mean for it to happen. We kissed, and it went further than that. I'm so sorry. I felt the world crumble around me, her words echoing in my mind, each one like a dagger to my heart. She had cheated on me on our anniversary of all days. She had chosen him, her ex, over me. The man she had always told me was in her past had somehow found his way back into her life, into her heart. I took a step back, my hands trembling, my chest tightening. How could you do this? I asked, my voice filled with disbelief, with pain. How could you cheat on me, Laura? On our anniversary. She shook her head, her tears spilling over, her face filled with regret. I don't know, she whispered, her voice cracking. I wasn't thinking. I let myself get caught up in the moment, and I made a terrible mistake. I love you, Jack. I love you so much, and I never wanted to hurt you. I stared at her, my heart breaking, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me. You love me, I repeated, my voice filled with bitterness. How can you say that after what you did? You cheated on me, Laura. You betrayed me. How am I supposed to believe that you love me? She took a step toward me, her hands trembling, her tears falling faster. I know I've hurt you, she whispered, her voice breaking. I know I've broken your trust, and I don't know if I can ever make it right. But I want to try. I want to fight for us, for our marriage. Please, Jack, give me a chance to make this right. I shook my head, my heart aching, the pain overwhelming. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her, if I could ever look at her the same way again. The love that I had always thought was unbreakable now felt shattered beyond repair. I need time, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I need time to think, to figure out what I want. I can't just pretend that everything is okay. Laura, not after this. She nodded, her tears spilling over, her face filled with despair. I understand, she whispered, her voice trembling. I'll give you all the time you need. Just please don't give up on us. I turned and walked away, my heart breaking with each step I took. I didn't know what the future held, didn't know if we could ever come back from this. The trust, the love that had once been the foundation of our marriage, felt shattered, and I didn't know if it could ever be rebuilt. The days that followed were some of the longest and hardest of my life. I couldn't stop replaying that night in my head, Laura standing there, her tears spilling over, her voice trembling as she confessed what she had done. Couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that the woman I had trusted more than anyone else in the world had betrayed me like that, on our wedding anniversary of all days. It felt like everything I thought I knew about our marriage, about Laura, had been a lie. I spent the next few nights at a friend's place. It wasn't much, just a small couch in his apartment, but it was enough to give me the space I needed to think, to try to make sense of everything that had happened. My friend, Mike, didn't push me for answers. He could see how broken I was, how much pain I was in, and he just let me be. He let me have the silence I needed, the time to process everything without any added pressure. The hardest part of it all was the emptiness, the sudden absence of the life I had built, the life I had thought was unbreakable. I missed my home, I missed my routines, and, most of all, I missed Laura. As much as her betrayal hurt, I still loved her. I hated that I loved her, hated that I still cared about her, but I couldn't help it. She had been my world for so long, and now that world had come crashing down, leaving me standing in the ruins. On the fourth night, I decided to go back home. I couldn't stay away forever, and I knew that at some point, I had to face Laura again. I had to talk to her to figure out if there was any way we could move forward, if there was any way to salvage what was left of our marriage. I wasn't sure if I wanted to forgive her, if I even could, but I knew that I had to at least try. When I walked into the house, the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. It was late, and the lights were off, the silence almost suffocating. I dropped my bag by the door, my heart pounding as I made my way to the living room. Laura was sitting on the couch, her knees pulled up to her chest, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked up when she heard me, her face filled with a mix of hope and fear. "Jack," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're home." I nodded, my chest tightening, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me. "Yeah," I said softly, my voice cracking. "I'm home." She stood up, her hands trembling, her tears welling up again. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I've been waiting for you, hoping you'd come back. I know I've hurt you, and I don't know if I can ever make it right, but I want to try. Please, Jack. I love you." I looked at her, my heart aching, the pain still raw. "You say you love me," I said, my voice filled with bitterness. "But how could you do this to me? How could you be with him on our anniversary?" She took a deep breath, her tears spilling over, her shoulders trembling. "I don't have an excuse," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I let myself get caught up in something that should have stayed in the past. I thought I could handle seeing him, that it would be harmless. But I was wrong. I made a terrible mistake, and I hurt you and I hurt us. I know I can't change what I did, but I want to fight for us, Jack. I want to make things right." I shook my head, my hands trembling, my heart pounding. "I don't even know if I can look at you the same way again," I said, my voice cracking. "Every time I see you, all I can think about is you with him, about how you chose him over me. How am I supposed to move past that?" She stepped closer, her hands reaching out, her eyes filled with desperation. "Please, Jack," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I'll go to counseling, I'll give you all the time and space you need. I just want a chance to make things right. I love you, and I don't want to lose you." I took a deep breath, my chest tightening, the weight of her words pressing down on me. I wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that there was still something left for us to fight for, but I didn't know if I could. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her, if I could ever look at her without seeing the betrayal, without feeling the pain. "I need time," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need time to figure out what I want, to figure out if I can ever forgive you. I can't just pretend that everything is okay." She nodded, her tears spilling over, her face filled with a mixture of hope and despair. "I understand," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'll give you all the time you need. Just please, please don't give up on us." I turned and walked up the stairs, my heart heavy, the pain overwhelming. I went to the bedroom, closing the door behind me, my hands trembling as I sat down on the edge of the bed. I didn't know if we could ever come back from this. Didn't know if the love we had once shared could ever be enough to overcome the betrayal that had shattered us. The days that followed were filled with silence. I stayed in the house, but I kept my distance from Laura. She tried to talk to me, tried to bridge the gap that had grown between us, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I wasn't ready. I couldn't look at her without feeling the pain, without seeing her with Ryan, without remembering the night she had shattered everything we had built. One afternoon, I decided to go for a drive. I needed to clear my head, to get away from the house, from the memories that seemed to haunt every corner. I ended up at the park where Laura and I used to go when we were first dating, a quiet, secluded spot by the lake. I parked the car and walked to the edge of the water, my heart heavy, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I sat down on a bench, staring out at the lake, the water calm and still. I thought about everything, about the life Laura and I had built together, about the love we had shared, about the betrayal that had torn us apart. I thought about the vows we had made, the promises we had kept, and the ones we had broken. I wanted to forgive her. I wanted to find a way to move past the pain, to rebuild what had been broken. But I didn't know if I could. I didn't know if I could ever look at her without feeling the sting of her betrayal, without wondering if she would hurt me again. As I sat there, lost in my thoughts, I heard a voice behind me. Jack. I turned, my heart pounding, and saw Mike standing there, his expression filled with concern. He had always been my best friend, the one who had stood by me through everything, and seeing him now, I felt a surge of emotion. I hadn't told him the full story, hadn't told him about Laura's betrayal, but I could see in his eyes that he knew something was wrong. "Hey, man," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He walked over, sitting down beside me, his eyes fixed on the lake. "You want to talk about it?" he asked softly. I took a deep breath, my heart heavy, the weight of everything pressing down on me. "Laura cheated on me," I said finally, my voice cracking. "On our anniversary. With her ex." Mike's eyes widened, his face filled with shock. "Jack, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice filled with empathy. "I had no idea." I nodded, my chest tightening, my hands trembling. "I don't know what to do," I whispered. "I still love her, but I don't know if I can ever forgive her. I don't know if I can ever look at her without seeing him, without feeling the pain." Mike took a deep breath, his eyes filled with sympathy. "It's okay to feel that way," he said gently. "What she did was wrong, and it's going to take time to heal. You don't have to make any decisions right now. Just take it one day at a time and figure out what's right for you." I nodded, my heart aching, the weight of his words pressing down on me. One day at a time. It was all I could do. The days after my talk with Mike were still difficult, but having him listen and understand without judgment helped me feel less alone. I knew that no matter what happened, I would have someone by my side, someone who cared about me. But there was still so much pain, so much uncertainty about what to do next with Laura. I wanted to heal, but I couldn't do that without confronting the reasons behind what had happened. I had to know why she had allowed Ryan back into her life, why she had crossed that line. I needed answers. Without them, I didn't think I could ever begin to move forward, whether it meant working on our marriage or walking away from it for good. One evening, after days of avoiding each other, I asked Laura if she'd sit down with me in the living room. I could see the hesitation in her eyes, the fear that this conversation would be the end of us. She nodded, her eyes red and swollen, her face pale. She looked exhausted, as if she hadn't slept at all since the night she confessed. I sat down across from her, the silence between us heavy and suffocating. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding, the weight of the questions I needed to ask pressing down on me. "I need to understand, Laura," I said softly, my voice trembling. "I need to understand why you let him back into your life, why you did what you did. I need to know how this happened." She looked down at her hands, her tears welling up, her shoulders slumping. "I've been trying to figure that out myself," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never meant for it to happen, Jack. I never meant to hurt you." She took a deep breath, her tears spilling over as she looked up at me, her eyes filled with regret. "When Ryan reached out to me, I thought it was harmless," she said softly. "He said he wanted closure, that he wanted to apologize for how things ended between us. And I guess a part of me wanted that closure too. I wanted to put that chapter of my life to rest." I felt my stomach twist, the anger bubbling up inside me. "And that led to you sleeping with him?" I asked, my voice cracking. "How do you go from wanting closure to betraying everything we've built together?" She nodded, her tears falling faster, her face twisted in pain. "I know it sounds crazy," she whispered. "I let myself get caught up in the nostalgia, in the past. He was my first love, and seeing him again brought back all these memories, all these feelings that I thought I had put away. And I made a terrible mistake. I let myself be vulnerable with him, and I shouldn't have. I should have walked away, but I didn't. I thought I could handle it, but I was wrong." I shook my head, my heart aching, the pain overwhelming. "And you thought it was worth risking everything we had?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You thought it was worth throwing away our marriage, our life together, for him?" She looked up at me, her tears spilling over, her face filled with despair. "No, Jack," she whispered, her voice cracking. "It wasn't worth it. None of it was worth it. I would give anything to go back and change what I did. to undo the pain I've caused you. I love you, and I know I've destroyed your trust, but I want to find a way to fix this. I stared at her, my heart pounding, the weight of her words pressing down on me. I wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that there was still hope for us, but I didn't know if I could. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her, if I could ever trust her again. I don't know if I can do this, Laura, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again. Every time I look at you, I see him. I see what you did, and it hurts. She took a deep breath, her tears spilling over, her shoulders trembling. I know, she whispered, her voice breaking, and I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, and I don't expect things to go back to the way they were. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I'm willing to fight for us, to prove to you that I love you and that I'm committed to making things right. I shook my head, my heart heavy, the pain still raw. How do I know you won't do it again? I asked, my voice trembling. How do I know that I can trust you, that you won't hurt me like this again? She looked down, her tears falling faster, her face twisted with regret. I can't make you any promises that will take away your pain, she whispered. All I can do is show you, every day, that I'm committed to you, that I love you, and that I will never make this mistake again. I know it's going to take time, and I know I may never earn back your trust, but I'm willing to try. I took a deep breath, my chest tightening, the weight of her words pressing down on me. I wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that there was still something worth fighting for, but I was scared. I was scared of getting hurt again, scared of opening myself up to that kind of pain once more. I need more time, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm not ready to make any decisions yet. I need to figure out if this is something I can live with, if I can ever truly move past it. She nodded, her tears spilling over, her face filled with a mixture of hope and despair. I understand, she whispered, her voice trembling. I'll give you all the time you need. Just please don't give up on us. I stood up, my heart heavy, the pain overwhelming. I'm going for a walk, I said softly, my voice cracking. I need some air. Laura watched me, her eyes filled with emotion, her tears falling faster. Okay, she whispered, her voice trembling. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready. I turned and walked out the front door, the cool night air hitting me like a slap to the face. I walked down the street, my hands trembling, my mind racing with everything that had been said. I wanted to believe that there was hope for us, wanted to believe that we could move past this, but I didn't know if it was possible. The betrayal was too fresh, the pain too raw. I ended up at the small park near our house, the same park where Laura and I used to come when we first moved into the neighborhood. I sat down on a bench, my heart heavy, the memories of our time together flooding my mind. I thought about the way she had smiled at me when we first met, the way she had laughed when we danced in the rain on our wedding day, the way she had always made me feel like I was the only person who mattered. And now, all of that felt tainted by her betrayal, by the choices she had made. I wanted to forgive her. I wanted to find a way to move past the pain, to rebuild what had been broken. But I didn't know if I could. I didn't know if I could ever look at her without seeing Ryan, without remembering the night she had shattered everything we had built. As I sat there, lost in my thoughts, I realized that the only way I could find out if there was hope for us was to try, to take it one day at a time, to see if we could find a way to rebuild, to see if the love we had once shared was still strong enough to overcome the pain. I stood up, my heart heavy, and made my way back home. When I walked through the door, Laura was still sitting on the couch, her eyes filled with tears, her face pale. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. I'm not ready to make any promises, I said softly, my voice cracking. But I'm willing to try. One day at a time, Laura. That's all I can give you right now. Her tears spilled over, her face filled with emotion, her shoulders trembling. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking. That's all I want. I love you, Jack, and I'm going to do everything I can to make this right. I nodded, my heart aching, the pain still there but mingled with a sense of possibility. One day at a time, I said softly, my voice cracking. That's all we can do. The next few weeks were filled with a strange, fragile balance. Laura and I were trying to coexist in the same space, trying to find some semblance of normalcy, but it was anything but easy. There were moments when I would catch myself watching her, wondering how things had gone so wrong. Moments when I felt the anger bubbling up inside me, threatening to consume me. But there were also moments, small, fleeting moments, when I could see a glimpse of the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman I had built my life with. And it was in those moments that I found myself wanting to see if there was a way for us to move forward. Laura had started going to therapy. She was serious about wanting to make things right, and she knew that in order to do that, she needed to confront the reasons behind her actions. She had asked me to come with her, to attend couple sessions together, but I wasn't ready. I needed her to take those first steps on her own, to show me that she was willing to put in the work, even if I wasn't there by her side. She would come home from her sessions, her face tired, her eyes red from crying, but she never stopped trying. She would sit down with me, her voice soft as she talked about what she had learned, about the things she was trying to understand about herself. She opened up to me in a way she never had before, telling me about the insecurities she had been carrying, the doubts she had about herself, about us. It was hard to hear, but it was also the honesty I needed. I needed to know that she was willing to bare herself completely, to face the things she had been hiding, if we were ever going to have a chance at moving forward. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, Laura looked at me, her eyes filled with uncertainty, her hands trembling slightly as she picked at her food. I could tell she had something on her mind, something she was scared to say. "Jack," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know things are still hard between us, and I know I have no right to ask anything of you right now, but I was wondering if you would consider coming to a session with me, just one to see if it helps." I looked at her, my heart heavy, the weight of her request pressing down on me. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face everything in a therapist's office, to lay all of our pain bare in front of someone else. But I could see the hope in her eyes, the desperation for something that might help us find a way forward. "I don't know, Laura," I said finally, my voice trembling. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." She nodded, her eyes welling up with tears, her face filled with understanding. "I get it," she whispered, her voice cracking. I want to do whatever it takes to fix this, and I thought, maybe it would help. But I understand if you're not ready." I took a deep breath, my chest tightening, the pain still raw. "I'll think about it," I said softly. "That's all I can promise right now." She nodded, her tears spilling over, her face filled with a mixture of hope and sadness. "Thank you," she whispered. "That's all I'm asking." The following week, I found myself standing outside the therapist's office. I wasn't sure how I had ended up there. Maybe it was the way Laura had looked at me, the hope in her eyes, or maybe it was the realization that I couldn't keep living in this limbo forever. I needed answers, needed to understand if there was a way forward for us. So I had decided to come, to give it a try, even if it was just once. When I walked into the waiting room, Laura's eyes widened in surprise. She stood up, her hands trembling, her eyes filling with tears. "Jack," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You came." I nodded, my heart pounding, the weight of everything pressing down on me. "I said I'd think about it," I said softly, "and I guess I decided to give it a try." She took a step toward me, her eyes filled with emotion, her tears spilling over. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It means more to me than you know." The therapist, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Mitchell, called us in, her voice gentle as she greeted us. We sat down on the couch, the silence between us heavy, the tension almost suffocating. Dr. Mitchell smiled at us, her eyes kind, her demeanor calm. "So Jack, Laura," she said softly, her voice filled with warmth, "I understand that you're both here because you're trying to work through some difficult things in your marriage. I want you to know that this is a safe space where you can share openly, without judgment. My role is to help you both understand each other better, to help you find a way to communicate and heal. So, let's start by talking about what brought you here today. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding, my hands trembling as I looked over at Laura. She looked back at me, her eyes filled with tears, her face pale. I could see the fear in her eyes, the fear that this would be the end of us, that I would decide that I couldn't move past what had happened. I'm here because I don't know if I can ever forgive her, I said finally, my voice cracking. I don't know if I can ever look at her without seeing what she did, without feeling the pain. Laura looked down, her tears spilling over, her shoulders slumping. I know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. And I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I know I've hurt you in ways that I can't take back. But I love you, Jack. I love you, and I want to fight for us. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, no matter how long it takes. Dr. Mitchell nodded, her eyes filled with empathy. It's clear that there's a lot of pain here, she said gently. But it's also clear that there's still love. And that's a powerful thing. Forgiveness isn't something that happens overnight. It's a process, one that takes time and effort. And it's okay to not know if you're ready for it yet. The important thing is that you're both here, that you're both willing to try. I looked at Laura, my heart heavy, the pain still raw but mingled with a sense of hope. I want to try, I said softly, my voice trembling. I don't know if I can ever move past this, but I want to try. I want to see if there's still something worth fighting for. Laura nodded, her tears spilling over, her face filled with emotion. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking. That's all I want. One day at a time, Jack. That's all I'm asking for. As we continued to talk, the weight of everything pressing down on us, I realized that maybe, just maybe, there was still hope for us. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to happen overnight. But we were both willing to try, both willing to take it one day at a time, to see if we could find a way to rebuild what had been broken. After the session, Laura and I walked out of the office together, the silence between us no longer heavy with anger, but with something that felt almost like hope. She looked over at me, her eyes filled with emotion, her voice trembling as she spoke. Do you want to grab a coffee? She asked softly. Maybe we can just talk. Not about everything that happened, but just talk. I looked at her, my heart aching, the pain still there but mingled with a sense of possibility. Yeah, I said softly, my voice cracking. I think I'd like that. As we walked to the coffee shop down the street, I realized that we still had a long road ahead of us. There were still wounds that needed to heal, still trust that needed to be rebuilt. But we were taking the first steps together. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. After the therapy session, something shifted between Laura and me. It wasn't a dramatic change. We didn't suddenly go back to the way things were before everything fell apart. But it was a start. The walls between us, built from pain and betrayal, were beginning to crumble, if only slightly. It was as if we had finally found a crack in the fortress that had separated us. And we were each taking turns chiseling away at it. That evening, sitting in the coffee shop, we talked. Not about Ryan, not about what had happened or what might happen to our marriage, but just talked. We talked about work, about the new projects we were each working on. We talked about the little things we used to share, like what we'd binge-watched recently, how annoying our neighbors could be. It felt almost normal, like two people relearning how to communicate, to find each other again. Over the next few weeks, Laura and I continued therapy, both together and separately. There were sessions where I didn't know if I could keep doing this, if I could keep opening myself up to the pain. But there were also moments in those sessions, moments when Laura let her guard down completely, when she bared her soul, that made me realize she was truly trying. She was doing everything she could to rebuild my trust, to show me that she loved me, and that she was willing to fight for us. One night, after a particularly emotional therapy session, Laura asked if I wanted to go out for dinner. She suggested the small Italian restaurant down the street from our house, the one we used to go to every Friday when we first moved in together. I hesitated, the weight of the memories pressing down on me, but then I nodded. It had been so long since we had gone out together, since we had done something that felt like it was just for us. The restaurant was just as I remembered it, small, cozy, with checkered tablecloths and dim lighting. We were seated at a table by the window, and as we sat down, I could see the nervousness in Laura's eyes. She was worried that this might be too much too soon, that the memories might be too painful. But I wanted to try. I wanted to see if we could find our way back to each other. The waiter came by and we ordered our usual spaghetti carbonara for me, chicken Alfredo for Laura. When the food arrived, Laura looked at me, her eyes filled with emotion, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Jack," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I've said this so many times, but I need you to know, I'm truly, deeply sorry for everything. I know I hurt you, and I know I broke your trust. I don't expect you to just forgive me, but I want you to know that I'm committed to doing whatever it takes to make things right." I looked at her, my heart heavy, the pain still raw but mingled with something else, something that felt almost like hope. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, the desperation to make things right, to prove to me that she was still the woman I had fallen in love with. I took a deep breath, my chest tightening, the weight of her words pressing down on me. "I know," I said softly, my voice cracking. "I know you're trying, Laura, and I appreciate it. I really do. But it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of time for me to be able to trust you again, to be able to look at you and not see the betrayal." She nodded, her tears welling up, her face filled with a mixture of sadness and hope. "I understand," she whispered. "I'm not expecting anything to change overnight. I'm just grateful that you're here, that you're willing to try." We ate in silence for a while, the sounds of the restaurant around us, the clinking of silverware, the murmur of conversations, providing a comforting background noise. It felt almost surreal, sitting there with Laura, trying to move past everything that had happened, trying to find a way back to each other. As we finished our meal, Laura looked up at me, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "Do you remember the first time we came here?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, a small smile tugging at my lips. "Yeah," I said, my voice filled with nostalgia. "You spilled your wine all over the table, and you were so embarrassed. You kept apologizing to the waiter, and I couldn't stop laughing." She smiled, her eyes welling up with tears, her face softening. "You made it better," she whispered. "You always knew how to make things better." I looked at her, my heart aching, the weight of her words pressing down on me. "I don't know if I can make this better, Laura," I said softly, my voice trembling. "I want to try, but I don't know if it will ever be the same." She nodded, her tears spilling over, her face filled with a mixture of hope and sadness. "It might not ever be the same," she whispered, "but maybe it can be something new. Maybe we can build something different, something that's still good." I took a deep breath, my heart heavy, the pain still there but mingled with a sense of possibility. "Maybe," I said softly, my voice cracking, "maybe we can." As we left the restaurant, Laura reached for my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine. I hesitated for a moment, the weight of everything pressing down on me, but then I squeezed her hand gently. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was something. A small step toward finding our way back to each other. That night, as we walked home, the cool night air surrounding us, I realized that the road ahead was still uncertain. There were still wounds that needed to heal, still trust that needed to be rebuilt. But there was also hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to move forward, to rebuild what had been broken. The following weekend, Laura suggested that we go away for a night, just the two of us. She knew it was a lot to ask, that it might be too soon, but she also wanted to try to create new memories, to find a way to reconnect. I hesitated, the fear of being vulnerable with her again almost paralyzing me. But then I agreed. I knew that if we were ever going to have a chance at rebuilding our marriage, we had to be willing to take risks, to let ourselves be vulnerable again. We booked a small cabin about an hour outside of town. A place we had gone once before, early in our marriage, before life got complicated. It was a place filled with good memories, and I hoped that maybe it could be a place where we could start to create new ones. When we arrived, the cabin looked just as I remembered it, cozy with a small porch overlooking the lake. We unpacked, the silence between us no longer heavy with tension but with something that felt almost like hope. That evening, we sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the lake, the sky painted in shades of pink and orange. Laura looked over at me, her eyes filled with emotion, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Jack," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for being here, for giving us a chance. I know it's not easy, and I know it's going to take time, but I'm so grateful that you're willing to try." I looked at her, my heart aching, the pain still there but mingled with a sense of possibility. "I love you, Laura," I said softly, my voice cracking, "and I'm willing to keep trying. One day at a time, right?" She nodded, her tears spilling over, her smile widening. "One day at a time," she whispered. As we sat there, the sun dipping below the horizon, I realized that maybe, just maybe, we still had a chance. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be the same as it had been before. But we were trying, both of us, and that was enough for now. The night at the cabin was a turning point for us, a moment that felt like the beginning of something new. It wasn't like all the pain and betrayal magically disappeared, but for the first time since Laura's confession, I felt like we were genuinely connecting again. We were two people who had been broken but were trying to piece things back together. Slowly, carefully, with the understanding that we had to rebuild everything from scratch. When we returned home, the atmosphere between us was different. The tension wasn't gone, but it wasn't as suffocating as it had been before. There was a newfound softness between us, a willingness to be vulnerable, to let our guards down, even if it was just a little. We were beginning to talk more, to share things with each other that went beyond the surface. I found myself wanting to spend time with her again, to let her back into my world. It wasn't easy, but it felt like we were finally making progress. We continued therapy, and I could see how much it was helping Laura. She was changing. She was more open, more introspective, more willing to acknowledge her mistakes and work through them. It wasn't about making excuses or justifying what she had done. It was about understanding herself and the choices she had made. And I appreciated that. I appreciated that she was doing the work, even though it was painful, even though it meant facing the darkest parts of herself. One day, during a therapy session, Dr. Mitchell asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Jack, what would forgiveness look like for you?" she asked, her eyes kind, her voice gentle. I hesitated, the weight of the question pressing down on me. Forgiveness was something I had thought about constantly since the day Laura had confessed, but I wasn't sure if I truly understood what it meant for me. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling slightly as I tried to find the words. "I think forgiveness for me would be about letting go of the anger," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "It would be about not letting the betrayal define our relationship anymore. I don't think I could ever forget what happened, but I want to be able to look at Laura without feeling that pain, without seeing the mistakes she made. I want to feel like we can move forward without the weight of the past holding us back." Laura looked over at me, her eyes filled with tears, her face etched with emotion. "I want that too," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know it's going to take time, and I know I have to earn your forgiveness, but I want to do whatever it takes to make that possible." Dr. Mitchell nodded, her eyes filled with empathy. "Forgiveness is a journey," she said gently. "It's not something that happens overnight. It's a choice that you make every day to let go of the pain, to choose love over resentment. And it's okay if you're not there yet, Jack. The important thing is that you're both willing to work toward it." As we left the therapist's office that day, I felt a sense of clarity that I hadn't felt in a long time. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting what had happened or pretending that everything was fine. It was about making a choice, every single day, to let go of the anger, to let go of the pain, and to move forward with love. It was about building something new, something different, but something that was still worth fighting for. That weekend, Laura and I decided to take another small step toward rebuilding our lives together. We invited a few close friends over for dinner, something we hadn't done in months. It felt daunting, the idea of opening up our home again, of letting people back into our lives, but it also felt necessary. We needed to start living again, to find joy in the little things, to remind ourselves that our lives were still worth celebrating, despite everything that had happened. As we prepared for the dinner, I could see how much it meant to Laura. She was nervous, her hands trembling slightly as she set the table. But there was also a lightness in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. She wanted to make this night special, to show me and our friends that we were still us, that we were still capable of creating beautiful moments together. When our friends arrived, the house filled with laughter and conversation, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of normalcy. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when the memories of what had happened would creep in, when I would feel the sting of betrayal, but I tried to focus on the present, on the people around me, on the woman beside me who was doing everything she could to make things right. As the night went on, I found myself watching Laura, watching the way she laughed, the way her eyes lit up when she talked to our friends, the way she looked at me with so much love and hope. I could see how much she had changed, how much she was trying, and for the first time, I felt like maybe I could truly forgive her. Maybe I could let go of the pain, let go of the anger, and choose to love her again. After our friends left, the house was quiet again, the warmth of the evening lingering in the air. Laura looked over at me, her eyes filled with emotion, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Thank you, Jack," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Thank you for tonight, for letting me be a part of this again. I know it's not easy, but I'm so grateful that you're still here, that you're still willing to try." I took a deep breath, my heart aching, the pain still there but mingled with a sense of possibility. "I love you, Laura," I said softly, my voice cracking, "and I think I'm ready to start forgiving you. I don't know if it will ever be the same, but I want to try. I want to let go of the pain and move forward." Her tears spilled over, her face filled with a mixture of relief and hope. She took a step toward me, her hands trembling as she reached for mine. "I love you too," she whispered, her voice breaking, "and I promise I will never stop fighting for us, for our love. One day at a time, right?" I nodded, my heart swelling with emotion, the weight of everything pressing down on me. "One day at a time," I said softly. That night, as we lay in bed, I held Laura close for the first time in what felt like forever. It wasn't perfect. There were still wounds that needed to heal, still trust that needed to be rebuilt. But it was a start. It was a step toward something new, something different, but something that was still filled with love. The road to healing was long, and I knew that there would still be moments of pain, moments when the memories of what had happened would come rushing back. But I also knew that we were both willing to fight, both willing to choose love over resentment, to choose each other one day at a time. And for now, that was enough. As the weeks turned into months, Laura and I settled into a new routine. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but we were trying. We continued therapy together, and each session brought us a little closer to understanding one another. We talked about our past, about the pain, but we also talked about our hopes and dreams for the future. I could feel the walls between us slowly crumbling, brick by brick, and in their place was a newfound openness, a willingness to be vulnerable. One evening, as we sat on the couch together, I looked over at Laura, her head resting against my shoulder. She looked peaceful, her eyes closed, her breathing soft. I couldn't help but smile. It was a small moment, a fleeting glimpse of the happiness we had once shared, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of hope. "Hey," I said softly, gently nudging her awake. "I've been thinking." She opened her eyes, her smile warm as she looked up at me. "What's on your mind?" "I think we should take a trip," I said, my heart racing as I spoke. "Just the two of us. Somewhere we can reconnect, away from everything. Could be a fresh start." Her eyes widened, a mix of surprise and excitement lighting up her face. "Really? You want to go away together?" I nodded, my heart pounding. "Yeah, I think it could help us. We've been through so much and I want to create new memories. Good ones. Together. Something that reminds us of the love we share." She sat up, her eyes shining with emotion. "I would love that," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Where do you want to go?" I thought for a moment, recalling the cabin we had rented years ago by the lake. How about that cabin in the woods? It was our favorite place. We could spend a few days just relaxing, enjoying each other's company. No distractions. Laura's smile widened, and I could see the excitement in her eyes. That sounds perfect. I'll start looking at dates and making arrangements. Over the next few weeks, we planned the trip, and I could feel the anticipation building. It was a chance for us to escape from the weight of our everyday lives, to breathe and reconnect in a way we hadn't been able to do since everything fell apart. I wanted to show her that I was ready to move forward, ready to embrace a future together, even if it was still uncertain. When the day of our trip finally arrived, I felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The drive to the cabin was filled with laughter and light conversation, something that had felt foreign to us for so long. As we pulled up to the cabin, I couldn't help but feel a wave of nostalgia wash over me. It looked just as I remembered, charming, cozy, surrounded by tall trees, with the soft sounds of nature in the background. Laura jumped out of the car, her eyes shining with excitement as she took in the scenery. "It's just as beautiful as I remember," she exclaimed, her laughter echoing in the quiet woods. "I can't believe we're finally here." We spent the first evening unpacking, laughing as we reminisced about our previous trips, the silly things we had done together. We cooked dinner in the small kitchen, sharing the responsibilities like we used to, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of normalcy returning. The familiar sense of garlic and herbs filled the air, and as we sat down to eat, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the right path. The next few days were a mix of adventure and relaxation. We went hiking in the nearby trails, exploring the beautiful scenery, and each step felt like we were shedding the weight of the past. We spent evenings by the fireplace, sharing stories, reminiscing about our early days together, and talking about our dreams for the future. It was healing, and it felt good to reconnect in ways we hadn't in so long. One afternoon, while we were out on the porch, I turned to Laura, my heart racing. "Can we talk about something?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. She looked at me, her eyes filled with concern. "Of course. What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. "I've been thinking about forgiveness. I know it's going to take time, and I know we still have a long road ahead of us, but I want you to know that I'm willing to try. I want to find a way to let go of the pain and move forward together." Her eyes filled with tears, her face softening as she reached for my hand. "Jack, that means so much to me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know I've hurt you, and I don't expect you to forget what happened, but I promise you, I'm committed to earning your trust again, to rebuilding what we had. I love you, and I want to do everything I can to make things right." I nodded, my heart swelling with emotion. "I love you too, Laura, and I think we can find a way to make this work. It won't be easy, but I'm willing to fight for us." As the sun set over the trees, casting a warm glow across the porch, I realized that we were finally starting to heal. It wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about learning from it, about growing together, about choosing love over pain. We had both made mistakes, but we were both willing to try, willing to fight for the love we still shared. As the days went by, we found ourselves falling back into a rhythm, laughing, talking, and reconnecting in ways that felt almost magical. I could feel the weight of the past slowly lifting, the darkness giving way to light as we took our first steps toward a future filled with hope. One evening, as we stood outside on the porch, looking up at the stars, I wrapped my arms around Laura, pulling her close. "No matter what happens, I'm glad we're here together," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Me too," she replied, her voice trembling. "I wouldn't want to be anywhere else." As we stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We were still on a long road to healing, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were moving in the right direction, together. As our time at the cabin came to an end, I felt a mixture of sadness and gratitude. The last few days had been transformative for us, a time when we had truly begun to reconnect. We had shared laughter, memories, and a sense of intimacy that had been missing for far too long. It felt like we had been given a second chance, a rare opportunity to rebuild our marriage and create something even stronger than before. On the last morning, as I stood on the porch sipping my coffee, I watched Laura as she took in the beauty of the early morning light filtering through the trees. She looked peaceful, her face illuminated by the soft rays of sunlight. I couldn't help but smile. I had fallen in love with her all over again, and the weight of the past felt a little lighter. As we packed our things, Laura turned to me, her eyes shining with emotion. "Jack," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to know how much this trip has meant to me. I feel like we've made real progress, and I'm so grateful that we took this time together." I nodded, my heart swelling with emotion. "Me too, Laura. I feel like we're finally finding our way back to each other. It's still going to take time, but I'm ready to keep trying." We finished packing the car, and as we drove back home, the tension that had once filled our lives began to fade. We talked about our plans for the future, our hopes and dreams. I could see the spark of excitement in Laura's eyes as she spoke, and it filled me with hope. Maybe we could create a new life together, one filled with love and understanding. Once we returned home, life began to settle into a new routine. We kept attending therapy, both individually and together. I watched as Laura continued to grow, to confront her past and learn from her mistakes. She was working hard to become the woman I needed her to be, the partner I had always known she could be. One evening, after a particularly good therapy session, we decided to have a quiet dinner at home. As we sat down to eat, I looked across the table at her, my heart racing. There was something I wanted to say, a promise I wanted to make. "Laura," I said softly, my voice trembling slightly, "I know that trust doesn't come back overnight, and I know we still have a long road ahead. But I want you to know that I'm choosing you every day. I'm choosing to believe in us, to believe that we can create something new together." Tears welled up in her eyes, her voice cracking as she spoke. "Thank you, Jack. That means the world to me. I promise you I will do everything I can to earn your trust again. I love you more than anything, and I'm so grateful you're willing to fight for us." That night, as we lay in bed together, I felt a warmth spreading through me. We talked for hours about our dreams for the future, about traveling, about starting a family, about everything we had always wanted. It felt like a weight had been lifted, and I could finally see a future where we were together, not defined by the past, but by our love and commitment to each other. In the weeks that followed, we continued to build on the foundation we were creating. I started to let go of the pain, the anger, and the fear that had once consumed me. It wasn't easy. There were days when the memories would surface, but I was learning to confront them, to process them instead of letting them control me. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching our favorite movie, I turned to Laura and smiled. "You know, I never thought I could get to this point again," I said softly, my voice filled with emotion. "But being with you like this, it feels so good. I feel like we're starting fresh." She looked over at me, her eyes shining with love. "I feel the same way, Jack. It's a new beginning for us, and I'm so grateful for that. I've learned so much about myself through all of this, and I want to continue growing with you." I leaned in and kissed her, feeling the warmth and connection that had been missing for so long. In that moment, I knew that while the road ahead might still have its challenges, we were on the right path. We were committed to each other, committed to rebuilding our marriage, and committed to choosing love every single day. One day, as we were walking through the park, I stopped and looked at Laura, the sun shining down on us. "I know we still have a long way to go," I said softly, "but I truly believe that we're going to be okay. We can overcome anything together." Her smile widened, and she squeezed my hand tightly. "Together," she echoed. "No matter what comes our way, I'm with you, Jack. I'm in this for the long haul." As we continued our walk, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I knew that we had been through the storm, that we had faced our demons and come out the other side stronger. It wouldn't always be easy, and there would be moments of doubt and fear, but I was ready to face them. I was ready to embrace the future we were building together. Laura and I had weathered the worst of the storm, and now we were standing at the brink of a new beginning, one filled with hope, love, and the promise of a future worth fighting for. Together, we were rebuilding our marriage, and together, we would create a love that was stronger than it had ever been before. Bye-bye.